start just by telling you a little bit about this. Like I said, I do a lot of interviews, but normally I don't know the people that I interview very well. I just meet them on the day of the interview, but this is really special because I happen to know these people, which makes it even better. So we're going to start down there. I'm going to talk a little bit about Pete, see if I can embarrass him. He is the director of photography, and he just, I mean, as you can see from this film, some beautiful work that he's done in this movie, and he's absolutely... He has been awarded the Emerging Cinematographer from the International Cinematographer Guild, and he's done a lot of work on a lot of independent films. He's also worked on films like Dreamgirls and Spider-Man, and he's just... the thing about Pete, though, that I want to say is that, you know, sometimes when you bring someone out from behind the camera and you ask them questions, it's not pretty. But he does a really good job. I've seen him do it, so I'm really excited to have him here today. So thank you, Pete, for joining us. And then I'd like to introduce J.K. Simmons. He's an actor. And then actors get no respect. So he's not just an actor, he's an iconic actor, as most of you probably know. He's been doing a lot of different kinds of roles, back from, you know, performing on Broadway and performing on the stage to, you know, kind of starting out with Law and Order and then playing the baddest of the bad guys in Oz. Really scary dude, right? But then taking some amazing left turns, right, to literal cartoon characters of J. Jonah Jameson and Spider-Man, to easygoing dads and Juno, to being, you know, stoic characters, just so many different things. And as you can see by his performance in this as well, you know, so many different iconic characters. And then he received a couple of awards, just like every award they could possibly give for Whiplash. And so it really, really, some amazing work that he's done. And the other thing I want to say about J.K. is that he has an ease about him that is just spectacular, both in his work and as a human. He's just a genuine, nice guy. And you know, when people get the kind of success that he gets, sometimes it's hard to stay nice. And I don't mean that, you know, that people aren't nice, but when you get at his level, there's just so many demands, and everybody wants something, and so sometimes it's hard. You can't say yes to everything. So, but he does manage to walk that line of being just so full of ease and confidence and just, you know, genuine niceties. And so it's, you know, it's nice to have someone on the set who's nice, right? And I think that really, you can see it in his performances as well. I think it is one of the reasons why we sympathize with him even when he's playing a villain. Like, you can see it in this movie, even though he's not, you know, being Mr. Charismatic, obviously, in this movie, but there's just an ease and a solidness about his performances and him as a human. So I just kind of it's great, I get to brag about them. Which brings me to Ms. Michelle Schumacher. So she is the writer, co-writer, director, producer, editor. I mean, this is her vision. She has two producers that produce with her, 3 producers total. That's tiny. It's a family affair. Her brother Randall Schumacher is one of the producers, and Eric Radsman. And they put this film together, and I can't say enough good things about her. She is the most single-minded person I know. Not only has she done this career, bringing movies like this, but she's also a performer in her own right. She's been on Broadway as a dancer and an actor in touring companies. She's also a black belt. So that comes in handy on the set. So she's just, you know, she's someone who, if she needs to know how to do something, she figures it out, and it's just really amazing. And then these two together have the most important production of all, is they have these 2 amazing children that are now becoming adults, and they're just wonderful human beings. So to be able to have these beautiful careers, I mean, most people do one of the things that Michelle has done in their lives, and she's just, you know, a force of nature. So kudos to you for being awesome parents and awesome filmmakers. I'm super proud of you. Super proud of you. So let's talk about the movie, Michelle. She's going to pay me another check from the mail. All right, so let's start with Pete. Hey, Pete. What's going on? Yeah? So Pete, I know that you've worked with Michelle on another movie in the past. So how did it come about to do this film? What was the thing that inspired you guys to talk about it on the first set, or she just send you the script, or what happened there?
It was a long gestational period. I mean, I think it was a year before we started talking. I got an early draft, and then we would just correspond whenever one of us got an idea, either email, call, text, picture, whatever. So, long process.
And one of the things that you know, I'm sure that you all notice, and that's so beautiful about this movie, is that it's, you know, 3 different time periods kind of stacked and told in such a beautiful way. Can you guys talk? I've seen you talk about this before, and I think it's just fascinating about the sensibilities in terms of creating these, here I'll give her mine, in terms of creating these time periods where you could tell for sure it was a different time period. I never felt lost, and yet it wasn't like, look at my big hair and my neon pants, it's 1980s. You know, it was like really, really thought out and well done. Can you guys talk a little bit about how you made that happen?
Yeah, we had a discussion about that early on about it. We didn't want a stark difference. We wanted a subtle difference between the periods, and you get it. You know, I mean, cliche is like, oh, let's make it black or white, and then we didn't want to do that. So it was a very subtle look done with lighting and lenses.
Yeah, so the movie takes place in the 3 time periods, the 60s, 80s, and present day. And what we didn't want was 3 completely different looks, so it looked like 3 completely different movies. We wanted a flavor of the time period. So, like, for example, the 60s, we actually chose lenses, and you can talk a little bit more about that, but in the 60s, we also, not only did we have different lenses for each time period, on the 60s we used a very subtle film grain to give it that look of the 60s period. So we feel we pretty much accomplished what we were going for, was one look for the overall film itself, but a very distinct, you knew what time period you were in, because it flashes back and forth so much. We wanted to make sure people knew, I'm in the 60s now, I'm in the 80s now, I'm in the present day now, and make it clear and right away. So that's what we were going for, without, like Carolyn said, without a really heavy-handed, you know, cliched 60s look or 80s look. So that's what we were going for. I don't know if you want to, would you like to talk more about the lenses? Or?
Yeah, so we used, between also lighting, we did different things each period of lighting, but the lenses for the 60s was Panavision Ultra Speeds, and I had lens tech Brian Mills at Panavision. I told him kind of what I was looking for and the lenses that I'd used before, and I said, but I need a reliable lens. It's an Indy. I can't have a lens that's all over the place as far as like go soft at a certain stop. And he brought up a few lenses, and then me and Michelle picked out the Ultra Speeds, and then I matched the set on a bench. I basically projected every single lens and matched the set, because they're old. So since they're old, they would discolor it. You know, each lens would discolor it a little different. So we matched the set, and then we went on from there. And then the 80s and the modern period was done on Primos, and they were tuned as well. I had those tuned to a look as well. When you go to Panavision, you can do that. You can actually detune a lens. So it's very tailored.
It's so cool. It's an example of sort of the overwhelming thought that went into this movie, and that's one of the beautiful things about it. And I was lucky enough to read a draft of the script, and I love it when I read a script. I've read thousands of scripts as a reader for production companies, and I love it when a script makes me think. And you'll see, this movie's going to stick with you. It sticks with you long after you see it, and the same was true with the script. And I'd never actually heard of Schrodinger's cat, so it made me go look up, what is that? And I absolutely love that when something makes me think about some, quantum physics. That's very unusual. So what was your process in kind of coming up with the script, Michelle? And kind of Tony Cummings, who plays the judge in the movie, is her co-writer. So that kind of gives you a visual as we talk about them.
We wanted to write a character-driven story about sort of choices that we make in our lives. Sometimes we get to a place in life and you go, how did I end up here? Maybe it's not the way you planned for yourself, or maybe it's not what you expected. And so when you reflect and you look back and you go, you sort of connect the dots of how I ended up here. And then we thought, okay, what if we layer in the idea of quantum entanglement and saw that in a real life potential, not Dr. Strange, which I loved, by the way, but how does that actually apply to us as humans? Like, how do we actually, what would that look like? So then we went down and down and down, 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 and we layered it with all kinds of potential possibilities. So that's where the idea came from originally. Do you want to comment on any of that?
I didn't write it. I only do one thing. I don't have 8 different hats like you do.
I have a question for you about that. How did you memorize all those lines? But in speaking to that, I know a lot of people have talked to you about the process of not working, not having any lines. It's very unusual, especially for the voice of Hollywood. It's kind of amazing for someone who does so many voiceovers, you don't even know how he's in your head all the time. So it's like he does so many voiceovers, but typically as an actor, you have this through line that you're working back and forth where you have, one actor says something and the story moves forward and it's a kind of a natural progression. But by yourself, you have to have this kind of idea. I mean, what you're thinking is where we're headed. So you have to be able to know where you're at in a film where you're not having that natural ability. And you do such a great job with it. What was that like? That's so unusual.
I really just had to show up and look terrible and have her tell me, what it is that I'm reflecting on and what, one of the aspects of the way that she and Tony constructed the script was the idea that as I'm going through all that I'm going through, the illness, the alcoholism, the everything else, but there are artifacts, there are objects in the house that trigger certain things. So those were very like sort of emotional anchoring devices for me as an actor, and then even in the longer sequences where there wasn't a specific prop triggering or specific memory, there was always this sense in my head, provided by both the script and by the director on the day of, this is where we just came from. This is where your brain just was. And it's interesting because so often as an actor, there's a lot of sort of room for interpretation. Well, no, you talk to the director. No, that's not what I'm thinking. This is what I'm thinking. It's back and forth. Well, no, we just showed what you're thinking. So,
You have to think this.
Yeah. No, so it was just more, I mean, in a way, it was much more clear.
Yeah.
And there was nice to have, in one way, less room for interpretation about what's going on up here, and really just a very clear idea of where you've been, where you are, and where you're going, which is, acting 101.
Yeah, that's what was so curious about, is wondering whether or not how much you gave him cues along the way of this is where we're at in terms of the bigger picture, because boy, it really relies on you knowing what you've got, knowing where you are. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and then of course, and I actually can't think of specific examples. I'm sure Michelle can. As she's editing, and then even in the case of this movie, after she had finished her edit, and which was a painstaking process because she did it all by herself. And then, of course, had to learn a new software because, God forbid, Final Cut still works. And then we took a family vacation, and we were, she was away from it for a few months, but it kept turning over in her mind, and she went back in and re-edited things, some of which were sequential changes, and then it becomes, as with any movie ever, you're always in the hands of the editor, and when the editor is also the writer and director, then that gives you a real kind of confidence in the continuity of what the story is going to be. But I'm sure you can speak to this, and we haven't even really talked about this, I don't think. I mean, editors steal stuff all the time. Editors steal things. If you're doing a dialogue scene, and you need to get a facial reaction from one of the actors, it's often not the real reaction that actor gave to that line at that time, So I don't know to what extent you ended up doing that in the final cut, but it worked.
It did. So that kind of brings me to, with all these actors, wow, what a cast, right? Oh my goodness, can you talk a little bit about that process of finding this incredible cast?
Yeah, well, Mary Vernew and Reva Khan Thompson at Betty May Casting, they brought in amazing actors to interview, and I could have cast any one of them, but Ian Armitage had done just a few episodes of Big Little Lies. I don't know if any of you have seen that. This was before Young Sheldon, because this has been in the process that long. He walked in and was just like, okay, I have to have this boy. Not only was he incredible, and his family is incredible, but he looks. JK has photographs where at that age they could be twins. I mean, it was remarkable the similarity. And then when Sebastian Stan came in, Sebastian has this sort of square-jawed, leading man type looks to him, and J.K. has
What's your point?
more of oval. He's more oval. So, but their eyes. There was something in Sebastian's eyes, besides being an incredible actor, and really. The more work he does, you guys are going to see. I know he came to people's awareness in the Marvel movies, but he's an incredible actor. There's something in the eyes. Their eyes are very similar. So that's when we thought, okay, rather than going, just the scruffy look, let's get that full beard in to cover sort of the only difference in my mind was visually the square jawed and the oval. So I think it works as the three of them. I think, to me, I bought it instantly. But that aside, Mandy, Max, Micah, M's. I only hired people with M's. Mandy Moore, Micah Monroe, Jeremy, Tony Cummings, who co-wrote it, Maguire, Jeremy Maguire. And then, of course, Tony wanted to keep writing more and more and more for the judge. He played the judge in this, but I had to tone him down.
So if you want to get your career started, you need to be in Michelle's movies, because right as they're in these movies, they just went, huge with This Is Us, hello, and he's on the little boys. Jeremy's on Modern Family. So it's like they got these huge gigs. So I think that's your gig there. So I have an odd question for you. So as a director of photography, what is it? What do you prefer when you're shooting? Do you like the scenes that have a lot of actors and there's activity, or do you prefer? There's so many beautiful, and thank you for this, by the way, of slowing things down. So many movies now are just bombarded with images, and this movie takes its time to tell a story, and I love that about it. And so, do you have a preference when you're shooting, like shooting something that's a slow burn and setting things up, or do you like those fast kind of now we're active, or do you have a preference as a DP?
I'm used to the fast just because of the kind of movies I shoot. So it's nice when you get to shoot something that can evolve, and it's not. It's not like we sat around all day and played cards. But it was even though you say one actor in some of those scenes, it's still a lot of work. But you like to take as much time as you can, but you can't.
And how many days did you shoot this movie in?
It was 20. I was 23 because I seen.
It was 23.
Was it
We've
20?
been saying like 20.
Yeah.
It was 23.
Oh, it was 22.
It felt like. We'd never slept. So I actually Randall, the main producer on the film, corrected me. He's like, "You keep saying 19 or 20. It was 23 days, Michelle." It was 23. Yeah. It
felt like one long day.
It felt like one long year.
That's 3 weeks. Think about what you do in 3 weeks. And they did this. It's kind of astounding. So we're going to go to. I just have one more quick question with all of you in terms of at Hollywood Gatekeepers. We talk a lot about being entrepreneurs and how being an artist is being an entrepreneur, and you have to decide all of these things, and you're juggling roles and when you're going to have your next project, and you might be the yellow M&M in the morning and Whiplash in the evening. How do you juggle knowing all of this stuff, being bombarded with all of these things, kind of figuring out where your next job is coming from, figuring out what your next project is? What is kind of a mindset that you can share so that people that as they get started, or if we have filmmakers in the audience, what are some of the mindsets that they can share, and then we'll move on to Q&A.
I have over the years found myself in a ridiculously fortunate position to actually be able to choose, what I want to do, and certainly for the first many years of my career, I was either choosing between, the one offer I was lucky enough to get, or waiting tables, or washing cars, or doing something else. So the main thing that I tend to look for, well, first of all, I look for a script that actually speaks to me, and that I, that not only that I think is good, obviously the first criterion, but secondly that I can see and or hear myself in, not hear in this case. And the fact that that I'm actually in a position now where people keep sending them to me, and I keep getting to make those choices is a real blessing.
Well, I have to say you've done an amazing job at not pigeonholing yourself, which is very easy for an actor to do. I'm sure after Oz, you would get all these Nazi, white supremacist scripts, and being able to make that left turn and say, no, not that, I'm going to go here. That's huge.
It was huge, and it was a deliberate decision to turn down all those Nazi of the Week offers. And then I got, one of the many ridiculously fortunate breaks, was 2 or 3 or 4 months after Oz, then they asked me to play the shrink on Law and Order. So I had
parts, given that you know each other and how that's different from the usual deal.
The shot on Alexa. So the shot on Alexa XT and Alexa Mini.
You got that? Everyone?
Well, there are several directors that I've worked with multiple times and have sort of built a level of trust and mutual regard with. There's only one director that I trust, implicitly more than any other person on the planet, and not only are we a team off camera, but I think that just so much of what we've been through in our lives together is informs. And not that this is taken from the story of any one particular person, or but it informs always my work, and certainly informed the story that we were telling here. It did help every time we've worked together, what was it, on her short films or whatever, or this. We have the dual advantage of, first of all, being in bed together the night before and being able to talk about it. Which is that's not to say that's how I got the job. But so you do, there is more intimate time to prepare it, but and in a way that's an advantage we don't even need, because we also have a shorthand in the moment on the set too, where when she comes up to me and needs me to do something slightly differently or make some kind of an adjustment, it's not usually going to be one of those back and forth conversations, which not that those conversations are arguments, but sometimes those conversations are just, let me see if I really understand what you're saying. And with her, I generally did, I hope.
I think it comes across. I think it does. Do we have any other questions? Yes, sir. Yeah.
This is more directed towards Pete. You talked about the lenses on the different eras that when you shot. Could you elaborate a little bit more on the different changes you might have done with the lighting? Did you use different color lighting, white, yellow, whatnot?
So the earlier periods, the lighting's a little warmer and softer, and then the 80s, it's, call it neutral, and then in the modern present, we did blanket lights above the set. They're LEDs, so I was able to control the ambient light and make it cool where his light was neutral or warm, or compare if it's the way you compare it was neutral, I would say. So those are 3 different periods in how we lit it on, basically.
Yes.
Hi. What scenes did you shoot first, and what went into the thinking behind scheduling it that way?
No, we went in order, not completely in order of the script, but we went in order of the time periods. We started with the 60s, and then we went to the 80s, and then we went to the present day, and we thought that would be, it was good for everyone. I felt like it was a really good way to sort of just get an energy and a flow, and a connectedness. Do you have thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was particularly, or not particularly, I found it very helpful because Sebastian, as this actor playing the middle version of Steve, really had the most complex task of trying to make this seem like one person, in 3 different times in his life, and he made a real point of studying, me. As soon as Sebastian came on board, Michelle and he and I got on Skype, and we spent a lot of time, even though you don't really play scenes together, either the 3 of us or Sebastian and I were just talking and hanging out, and him sort of taking aspects of me, into his character. So for me, I already had, and I was able to be on set some of the time watching Ian work or watching Sebastian work. I felt like everything was all set up for me because the character had already been created by these 2 other actors, and because they were able to shoot it more or less in chronological order, everything was set up for me to succeed in my portion of it.
Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Pete, working with a director who's also the writer and is going to be the editor, you guys just fly right along? Did you know exactly what you...
Tell us, Pete.
Well, it's my second movie with Michelle, so that actually always helps. And the fact that we had talked a lot before, pretty much on a day, it was pretty smooth. But, as a director, you're even if you don't edit the movie, you're shooting and directing for the edit. So, I know that helped. Probably. I mean, I'm sure to some extent it did.
And Michelle, you said when the script was brought up, J.K. said, "Don't ask me, I didn't write it." Does he not help you at all? Like, you're telling me
He is no help at all. No, actually, he has obviously incredible instincts, but he likes to wait until it's a finished script. So I said, "Oh, we're thinking about this idea, la la la," and he said, "That sounds interesting," and then he doesn't want to hear or read until it's done, and then he has lots of input, or opinions, or actually on this one, I mean, you kind of liked it done, but I know you've had other scripts where he's had a lot of input once it's done, sweetening the role or changing this or that. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that, but and then once it was done and we had a shooting script, then it was really just, I mean, he got the character, so it was really, in that regard, it was really, really smooth. This was smooth. This one.
Yeah.
Which leads to my last question. When your special lady friend hands you a script and you have no lines.
Yeah. Was there it's a little passive aggressive, isn't it? Like, shut up and listen. And that actually evolved too, because there were, as she and Tony were writing it, and I did sort of occasionally, even though I never read what they were doing, we would talk about it from time to time, and they did consider, at least briefly, maybe, we do need to have this character interact. Somebody comes to the door, there's this, there's that. Does it? Oh, right, yeah, and possibly having my sort of inner monologue, be a narration that would be the unifying thread for the story, which ultimately ended up not being necessary. And of course, that's one of those things that, she could have shot the whole film and been in the editing room and gone, oh, you know what, maybe we do need that, and it would have been easy to add afterwards, but we ended up not needing it.
Yeah, can I just say, not to, more, but yeah, we didn't need it. I mean, what astonishes me is, like, when the first screening audiences started to see it, a lot of them after the fact said, when they found out he didn't say a word, and this was one of the coolest things, they were like, wait a minute, he didn't say, like, people don't know he's not talking because he conveys exactly what he's thinking and feeling, and it comes across. You don't need narration, you don't need dialogue, you don't need, when something is so connected and so you know what he's feeling and thinking, and it's really, and thank you again for coming. If you just sit back and just let it, unfold, oh my gosh, I think it's incredibly powerful, and I know that he found it, I think, a fun challenge and interesting to play a character who doesn't say a word, and has maybe one or two scenes in the entire film where there's even another person in the shot with you. So it's like, what a challenge. And yet we get, and this is where I think the film succeeded, we're inside his head. If you take the journey with him by, hopefully a quarter of the way in, a third of the way in, you are in Steve's head. You hear everything he's thinking. So when people say, wait a minute, yeah, gosh, he didn't say a word, I didn't even realize that. You see a whole movie and don't know that somebody didn't say a word, that's an incredible performance and an incredible experience.
And I have to add, as a reader, I read so many scripts, and so many people hit you over the head with voiceover. It's one of my biggest pet peeves as a reader, and not trust their actors. So if you're a writer out there, trust that you have actors that know what they're doing. That's their job. You don't need to tell them angrily, happy, how to say their line. You don't need to put words in caps. They'll figure it out. And you just need to inform, like she did so beautifully, what the story is. And so if you inform that, the actor will run with it. And so it does become where you're in their head as opposed to having to read what they're saying. So kudos to you guys. So do we have any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
There are some scenes that are very focused on the child actors, and you as a director, how did you create an atmosphere or get them to convey, like the scene with the judge is very focused on Ian. You could tell that he doesn't want to be there. How did you create that atmosphere, or is it something that the children you just let them run with?
Right. That's a great question. Ian, it really is. I think he was born to be a performer. He's born to be, on stage, in films, TV. You explain to them some of the scenes you don't explain to the kids. Some of the scenes you just say, you're gonna taste this, and it's the worst thing you've ever tasted, and you spit it out. Right, so the alcohol scene, you don't tell them, oh, your daddy's just drinking alcohol, oh, you're staring at your, so in those scenes, you have to come up with a story to tell them, so that they can picture something, but it's obviously not the more adult-themed scenes. But the specific one that you're talking about with the judges scene, Ian actually, his mother's fantastic, and she would explain to him certain things, and so he actually knew what that scene was about. And I left that to the parents to decide what to tell their children and not. It's not, so he knew what that was about. It was really, I shot that entire sequence, you shoot one way and then you go shoot the other way. And I could have done it, I could have had a take, all of them, where I didn't cut away from Ian once. He was so present and he was so aware, and you see him thinking and you see him contemplating, and then when he gets it, oh my gosh, I think on some level he gets, this is about choosing my parent to go to, and it's just heart-wrenching. So yeah, so you have to be careful when you work with children, because you don't want to expose them to something that they should not be exposed to. But you can also treat them as they're in a profession and they're smart. They're smart kids and they get certain things. One thing I will say is, probably most of you know, you can only work with the child labor laws are very strict, and rightly so. So you get them for 4 hours, and both Jeremy and Ian were incredibly professional little kids, and yet they were also little kids, which is nice, because kids in this industry, it can be a really, really rough, but they're great kids, great families, and it was an absolute pleasure to work with them. They were very professional.
If you follow the Instagram of I'm Not Here movie, which you had that right, I corrected him the other night. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm a dope. I apologize right here in front of everyone. If you follow I'm Not Here movie, you can see some behind-the-scenes shots of like Ian playing the guitar and some really, really cool stuff, really cute stuff. I mean, clearly that there was a camaraderie between the cast that's really fantastic. So that was a great question. Thank you. Do you have any others? Cool. So, okay, just do one that we didn't get before. Yeah, just last one, and then we'll go.
It might be random, but I was just curious, there's a huge theme with Stevie with sugar and sweets? Is that an alcohol-related thing, or is that just something you threw in?
Yeah, no, we didn't just throw in anything. We actually spent a lot of time on the script. No, that is it. The groundwork was laid for the sweets, which is what alcohol is, but also that addictive behavior, right? That sort of obsessive sort of addictive behavior, but also getting away with something. The mother's left the room, no more up, he's getting away with something. It's all those things, yeah. No, everything. Tony and I we probably took about a year and a half to write this ultimately. And we threw away 60 pages 6 months before we shot. And we everything was painstaking. I mean, everything was thought about from everything on the set to lights, lenses, cameras, actors. Everything we thought about. And as an indie, we were really fortunate to get, I would say, 75 to 80% of what we wanted to get. So that's pretty remarkable for a true indie film.
And this is true indie, meaning the 3 producers managed to get it distributed and out there. So definitely share the love, share it on social media, let people know the film is also available online. So make sure that you get the movie as well. And I just want to say, as filmmakers and entrepreneurs, it's just so lovely to be able to look at this movie and say, look what you did. Look what you did. It's spectacular. So thank you so much for taking this. Really, really appreciate it.